We are in the final lesson of Chapter 7 about South and North American civilizations. And we are learning about North American cultures in Section 2. And recently we talked about the mound builders and Cahokia. And today we will learn about cultures in the East and Southeast. Okay, you know the drill. If you have your textbooks, have it ready, or log into Loda USD website and launch Clever. And from the left side, Cengage Learning with your user account, student account, and password. And from there, launch our National Geographic Learning for this lesson. And on the left side, Unit 3 and Chapter 7, Section 2, Lesson 5, Cultures in the East and Southeast. And it is in pages 194 to 195. So chapter 7's essential question is, in what ways do civilizations adapt to the environments in which they live? In other words, what are the means or ways they use in order to not just survive, but thrive to the challenging conditions that they were in? For example, the Northwest Coast cultures, the challenge of the ocean, the ancient Pueblo, the desert, the Great Plains, and the mound builders, the flood plains. And today, we will learn about the cultures of the East and Southeast. So the objective of this lesson is to explore Native American cultures in the East and Southeast. Native Americans in the East and Southeast hunted and farmed in the forest and woodlands in which they lived. So this lesson 2.5 describes cultures in the East and Southeast. So we will talk about the Cherokee and the Creek. So the Cherokee lived in the forest of the present-day states of Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina. The Cherokees are excellent hunters, and they are good in building log cabins using the wood from the forest that surround them. What is notable about the Cherokee is the alliances that they formed during wartime. So some villages were known as red towns, which I think it symbolizes the blood, where people held war councils and ceremonies. Other villages were considered white towns, or towns devoted to peace. So Spanish explorers arrived in the mid-1500s, and the British colonies moved into the region in 1700s. So the Cherokee traded extensively with both groups, so exchanging furs and animal hides and for horses, fabrics, and firearms. Now let's talk about the Creek, who lived south and west of the Cherokee in what are now the states of Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, and parts of Tennessee. Like the Cherokee, the Creek formed alliances with different tribes that spoke related languages. So the Creek had great respect for fire. Now, this is interesting. Each settlement had a permanent fire, which the people believed was a symbol of the life-giving powers of the sun. An important custom that the Cherokee and the Creek shared was the green corn ceremony. So corn was an important crop for both groups. So the Cherokee and the Creek held a ceremony when their corn first ripened. So in the early to mid-summer, over a period lasting from 4 to 8 days, they feasted, held dances, and repaired buildings. At the height of the ceremony, they share sacred fire at the center of the village's plaza. Now let's talk about the Algonquin and the Iroquois, who dominated the woodlands of the Northeast in the present-day southern Canada and upper New York and Pennsylvania. As you are probably aware that this area is wooded, so the woodlands provided food and plants and animals, but they could not support enough farming to sustain large cities just like other civilizations. So instead, farmers in temporary villages relied on slash and burn techniques. As you probably remember from our previous lessons, so farmers burned fields out of the forest and grew crops such as corn, beans and squash until the soil was exhausted or dried up. the entire villages would then move on to create new fields somewhere else. So they will use the same method that is ineffective. They will slash the forest, burn the trees, and use the ashes for fertilizer, and then plant crops. When it is not yielding, crops anymore, then they will move on to the next spot. The Algonquin lived in wigwams, just like the picture that you are seeing here in front of you. So these are like dome huts built on a framework of poles and covered with skins or bark. So wigwams could be quickly moved and easily adapted to the changing weather. So the Algonquin farmed for much of the year, but in the winter moved around because they were hunting game. So chiefs led villages made up of related families, and villages traded and formed loose confederations or group of allies to help each other through war or hardship. In contrast to the Algonquin, the Iroquois developed a more formal political structure. So they call themselves the people of the Long House. So they lived in villages of long houses in which as many as 10 families lived. Iroquois tribes fought each other until the 1500s when they formed the Iroquois League. This agreement formally bound together 5 tribes: Onondaga, Seneca, Mohawk, Oneida, and Cayuga. It is a representative and democratic alliance. This is a reproduction that shows what an Iroquois longhouse may have looked like. So, like wigwams, longhouses had dome roofs and were covered with tree bark for protection. Okay, so that is our lesson for section 2.5. Now let's go to the review and assess questions. Number 1, reading check. What was the function of the green corn ceremony in Cherokee and Creek culture? Number 2, compare and contrast. How did the political structures of the Algonquin and the Iroquois differ? And number 3, make inferences. How might the Iroquois League have helped end fighting among the Iroquois tribes? Okay, go ahead, go to our Google Classroom and open the review and assess questions. Fill up all the important information, and our key vocab is wigwam or wigwams. And don't forget the title of the lesson and answer the questions correctly in complete sentences using your own words. Okay, that's our last lesson for Chapter 7, Section 2, Lesson 5. Cultures in the East and Southeast.